Hello, and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. My name is Audrey Monkey, and I am your host. Here on the podcast and at my website at sunshine-parenting.com, I research, write, speak, and interview guests on the topics of summer camp, parenting, and happiness. I share stories, ideas, and tips to help parents and anyone else who works with young people raise competent, kind, optimistic kids. I believe that together we can raise a generation of happy, connected kids who bring positive changes to the world. In this episode of the podcast, I'm talking with Stephen Gray Wallace. He is the president and director of the Center for Adolescent Research and Education, a collaborative committed to increasing positive youth outcomes and reducing negative risk behaviors. Stephen has broad experience as a school psychologist, adolescent and family counselor, and a college professor. He is director of counseling and counselor training at Cape Cod Sea Camps and a member of the professional development faculty at the American Academy of Family Physicians. In this episode, we're talking about the benefits of summer camp programs for teens. I hope you enjoy this episode. Well, I'm excited to have Stephen Gray Wallace back on the podcast, and today's topic is 10 reasons why high school students will get a lot from summer camp. So welcome back to the podcast, Stephen. Good to have you back.
Thanks, Audrey. Great to be here.
So your article was from March 24th, and we have been talking about this topic before anyway, about how what a great experience it is for teenagers to go to summer camp. So let's just talk through some of the things that you wrote about in your article, starting with sort of the social skills that kids develop at summer camp.
Sure. Actually, I'd like to start with a larger construct, if I could, and then work our way into the top 10. So when you look at adolescents, there's three primary developmental tasks that they are trying to navigate. The first one is forming an identity that they can call their own. The second is gaining independence from their parents. And the third is making friends, establishing more adult-like friendships that are deeper and richer than the often transitory relationships of early childhood. So when you look at summer camp and how it relates to those three developmental tasks, well, identity formation, one of the things that we hear teenagers say all the time, that one of the things they love about camp is they get to be themselves, that they don't have to put on, a certain label that maybe at school they do, that they're the academic or they're the jock or they're the nerd or whatever it might be, that the camp they can just be who they are and they're accepted. So I think that's critically important. The second one is independence. Well, of course, they're going to camp. They're away from their parents. Whether it's a day camp experience or an overnight camp experience, they're still operating in an environment which is not supervised by their parents. And that helps them gain that independence that we want to see. And the third is the peer relationships. Kids also say all the time that their best friends are their camp friends, that they may spend only 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 8 weeks with their camp friends as opposed to their school friends with whom they spend a lot of time. But it's those deep relationships that are formed at summer camp that really have a dramatic influence on them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that really sums it up well, and how much camp can help with all of those things, really. So do you want to talk through some of your 10 things, the 10 outcomes from camp?
My top 10. So I can't take credit for these. These actually come from research from the American Camp Association. And again, these were enumerated in the article 10 Reasons Why High School Students Will Get a Lot from Summer Camp, which was published by Teen Life Media and is available on their blog. And you'll hear echoes of what we just talked about in some of these. So the first one is that they do develop friendship skills. They make friends and maintain relationships. The second one is the independence. They rely less on adults and other people for solving problems and for day-to-day activities. The third is teamwork, that they become more effective working in groups with peers. Fourth is what they call family citizenship, meaning that they gain attributes that are important to being a member of a family. In this case, it's a camp family. The fifth is perceived competence. They come away from camp believing that they can be successful in the things that they do. And we know that camps typically provide all kinds of different activities for young people and help them build that sense of competence. The 6 is interest in exploration. Kids at camp tend to be more curious and eager to learn new things. Number 7 is responsibility, learning to be accountable for their own actions and also to acknowledge when they make mistakes in the camp environment. 8 is that affinity for nature that we were talking about. They develop feelings of emotional attraction towards nature, enjoying being outside with those friends that they've made, engaging in those activities that are helping them feel more competent. 9 is problem-solving confidence. They become more self-assured about their ability to resolve problems. And the last is spiritual well-being, developing purpose and meaning in life through the experiential learning of summer camp.
Now, that is a lot of great stuff. Now, do you think there's, and maybe you know this from the research, is there an amount of time that teenagers need to be in a program to get these benefits, or is there sort of a not as much of an issue with dose or how long they're at camp?
Well, I would argue the longer the better, but I think that these types of outcomes transfer pretty quickly. So even if they're only attending for a week or two, I think you would see gains in those areas. Certainly, the longer they stay at camp, probably the deeper those attributes flow. And again, whether it's a day camp experience or an overnight experience, whether it's a private camp experience or a public camp experience, I think the outcomes are pretty consistent across the board.
Yeah, that is what I have learned as well. So I agree on that. So what do you think are some of the mechanisms of why camps get these great outcomes in teenagers? What do you think it is about these experiences that help teens with all these areas?
I think it's just the intrinsic nature of what we were talking about. They're away from home. They're away from their normal support systems. They have to figure things out more on their own. They're with a peer group for many hours during the day, and in the case of overnight camps, living in small, crowded spaces with other kids from, if not all over the country, maybe even all over the world. And that helps them build relationships and problem solving because lots of teens living in small spaces leads to lots of conflict. So they have to learn how to problem solve their way out of those conflicts. I think that, camps are really communities that bring young people together under one umbrella of a camp family, as I was talking about. There's a lot of camaraderie, there's a lot of spirit, there's a lot of singing, there's a lot of dancing, there's a lot of opportunity, as we talked about, to just let loose and be who they really want to be and not worry about being embarrassed. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just such a different environment than the typical high school, for these kids. I think they really do blossom just being in that community setting. And it was interesting when you were talking, some of the times when I'm talking to parents, I let them know, there are things that happen at camp that are not good experiences, failures or a kid you have trouble getting along with. And those are part of the growth experience of camp too. So there's all the fun things and all the great things, but even that person that you have to learn to live with and get along with in your group, who maybe, isn't your favorite person, that's also a really great outcome of camp, is learning to navigate, those kinds of, more difficult relationships and conflicts and that kind of thing. Absolutely. So I jokingly say that I spend about half my life writing college recommendations, which is probably about true. And one of the, when I get a request, I have them fill out a little questionnaire. And one of the questions is, how did your experience at summer camp as a teenager help prepare you to go to college? And they say just what you said oftentimes. Well, I learned how to live with a lot of other people, some of whom I didn't necessarily like, in a hot, smelly, disgusting, cat, which may very well be what a dorm room is like. And I learned how to survive and thrive. And so it gives them that sense of confidence that they're going to be able to go out on their own and succeed. Yeah, that's so good. And that just reminded me, I know you do a lot of work about transitions, the difficult transition for a lot of kids from high school to college. And we talked about this a little bit before, but not really in the context of how camp experience, because that can actually help prepare kids for that transition as sort of a practice ground for many of these kids. It's their first time being away from their parents, maybe not able to text with getting advice on a decision that they have to make. So what are your thoughts on how these camp experiences might better prepare kids for the transition to college away from home?
Well, I actually have been doing some research in that area, and this week I published an article in Psychology Today called A User's Guide to Surviving the First Year of College. And I used, or worked with rather, two of my former campers who are both first year college students, Aggie Chamlin, who's at Muhlenberg College, and Peter Warzala, who is at Northeastern University. And I asked them to look back on their first semester and answer a set of questions about how they survived, how they learned to thrive in the college environment. And it was very interesting because each of them talked about their summer camp experience and how they were able to use skills and assets that they learned at summer camp to navigate the college environment. And the interesting thing was that both Aggie and Peter are amazingly talented young people, intelligent, personable, sociable, smart, accomplished young people. And one of the big takeaways from what they wrote is that even they, who have been to camp for years, are used to being out on their own, even they, with all their skill sets and all their assets, still struggled to acclimate to the college environment because it's hard. You have to make new friends. You have to find your tribe. You have to explore your new environment. You have to learn how to manage your schedule. You've gone from, high school, which is highly structured, and your day starts at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it goes until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then you go to clubs or sports or homework and dinner, and everything's sort of structured. And one of them was, Peter was saying, I had to sort of figure out, my first class in the morning is at 8 o'clock, and then I don't have another class till 3 in the afternoon. What do I do during that time? Do I go take a nap? Do I go to the library and study? Do I go to the gym? So all of a sudden, these kids are having to learn how to structure their time, which is a whole new experience for them. And I think camp helps with that as well, because there's obviously downtime at camp, and they have to learn to fill up that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Let's unpack a little bit more about the responsibility piece, the learning to be accountable for their own actions and mistakes. I just finished reading this book that is, it was a Dale Carnegie book, and it's like an updated version, How to Win Friends and Influence People in the Digital Age. And a whole section that really stood out to me was about how important it is for people to be able to kind of fess up to their mistakes and apologize for mistakes. And they gave all these examples of how, celebrities often don't do this well. Like sometimes, when they try to, pretend like they didn't do anything wrong or, blame other people or whatever it is, that it never really goes well for them. But the people who, as soon as they make a bad mistake, say to everybody, you know what? I really made this terrible mistake. I'm really sorry for, the pain it's caused or what I did. People sort of are like, oh yeah, you know what? I've made mistakes too, and are a lot, better about kind of forgiving the person, really. And I was thinking about with teenagers how, gosh, it seems like a lot of them feel like they're not allowed to make any mistakes. They have to get all these good grades, and, they can't, if they mess up and post something online that they, wish they hadn't, they feel like mistakes are just fatal. And so I love this concept of thinking about how, at camp and in other settings, we can help kids learn to just be more able to kind of fess up to mistakes and talk about them. So what do you think are some of the ways, at camp or even maybe parents at home can help kids with this process of learning how to own their own actions and kind of admit mistakes?
Right. So I offer camp directors the same advice that I offer to parents in my book. And that is to hold your teenagers to very high expectations because they want to meet them. They want to meet your expectations. And then hold them accountable for those expectations. And the same is true in summer camp families. If you do that in your family at home, summer camp families should do it as well. And I think camp is a place where people are more relaxed and they're more able to both have fun with each other, but also call each other out when they're behaving irresponsibly or engaging in behavior that is hurtful to other people. I think they're more willing to say, hey, that's not okay. And if they get the support of their counselors and their camp directors, I think it's a great learning environment to figure out how to say, you're right, I'm sorry, I messed up, and I'll try not to do it again. So that's what I advise. To make sure that kids know what your expectations are, and then hold them accountable for meeting them.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know where I read so many different things or listen to podcasts. I don't know where I heard this, but I heard a great, somebody told a story of their parent asked them every evening at dinner, what did you fail at today? Mm-hmm. So the kids had to bring up something, and the adults did it too. And I was thinking about this in the context of camp. What a great thing, like what's a mistake you made today or what's some failure you had today, to make it so that kids are realizing that might make them more comfortable talking about those things, and also help them to realize that everybody has mistakes and failures, and that's how you grow, is sort of working through those things. And so I've been really kind of excited about this concept, because also in terms of kind of relationship building, when you are able to kind of own your own errors, like in interpersonal relationships and mistakes, you're much more likely to have better relationships. And I think a lot of kids are scared to admit when they've done something that has maybe hurt another person. But at camp and at home, we can just really help kids by helping them learn to just talk about these things and own it. If they say something and the person tells them that it hurt their feelings, for them to say, wow, I really didn't mean to do that, but I'm really sorry, and thank you for letting me know so that I can, not do that again, or whatever it is. So yeah, that's great. Well, so Annie, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in my book, I talk about the game high-low, right? At the dinner table, asking your kids, what was the high of the day and what was the low of the day? And it's that low of the day where they might be able to identify mistakes that they made or something they did that was hurtful to somebody else. And I think camp counselors can do the same thing. At the lunch table, at the dinner table, go around and ask kids, what went really well today? What didn't go well? What mistakes did you make? I think it's great. It's all about building that resiliency, which is so important. Mm-hmm. That kids, that young people, that teenagers can learn to identify what's successful and what's not successful. That's part of adolescence, is figuring out what works for them and what doesn't. And they do that through a trial and error process. They try on a lot of different roles, a lot of different masks, if you will, until they figure out what works best, what brings them maximum satisfaction and reward, which behaviors. And that's how they become who they're going to be as an adult.
Absolutely. So in this same article that I will definitely link to from the show notes, you talk about some of the questions that parents should be asking when they're signing their kids up for camp. So why don't we just talk about just maybe one or two of the things that you think are most important? Like specifically, you mentioned just safety and that kind of thing. What are some things that if a parent's looking at a program, they should be looking for their teenager?
Well, certainly health and safety is number one. I always remember in the video, which you've probably seen, Who Will Care When I'm Not There, which was produced by the American Camp Association, about a family that lost a child to drowning at a summer camp in New York. The mom, I always remember the mom sitting in the chair answering the question about that you just asked me. And she said, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what kind of shades are in the window. It doesn't matter how comfortable the mattresses are. What really matters is how safe of an environment you have. So that's number one, is really checking out health and safety. So the first question, and I would advise parents to, if possible, to either visit a camp that they're thinking about enrolling their child in, or at least having a video chat or a phone conversation with a director, and ask specifically about how do you keep the kids healthy and how do you keep the kids safe. The second thing I would say is ask about retention rates. How many kids return every year? What percentage? What percentage of staff return? Those are great indicators of how well camps are run. I would ask about communications. That's also very important. How are they able to communicate with their child? How can their child communicate with them? Different camps have different policies. Some camps have a adjustment period where parents are asked not to call so that kids are adjusting to the environment. Oftentimes, Kids are fine until they talk to their parents, and then they become homesick once they hear their parent voices. But in any case, at some point, particularly for residential camps, I think, parents are going to want to have communication with their child, and child are going to want to have communication with their parents. So figuring out what those protocols are, I think, is also very important.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you had on here that I do think resonates is just, what is it that, like, kind of the philosophy, like, to me, that's a big part is, you're entrusting these people with your child and their care and their guidance. And to me, a lot of it is, what's the philosophy of their program? And is the program promoting all those great outcomes that we just discussed? What are you doing to help the teens learn better citizenship or friendship skills or responsibility? How are you set up, and what is your philosophy around that? So I really like that idea of just saying, what is your reason for having these teens here, and what is it that you want them to go home with having learned after being at this program? I think that's another great thing to ask. Okay, well, we're almost out of our time here, Stephen, but it's been really great having you back on again. And I think this is a good time of year to be thinking about these programs and encouraging parents to send their teenage kids to camp. I think a lot of times parents think their kids have outgrown camp by the time they've gotten to high school. But right. I think you and I know that it could be the most important time for kids to go to camp.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me back, Audrey.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye. I really enjoyed chatting with Stephen about all the benefits that teenagers gain from attending summer camp programs. I hope you were as inspired as I was about how great it can be for kids to get out of their comfort zone and go to summer camp, even when they're in high school. As always, all of the articles, books, and other things that we discussed will be in the show notes for this podcast episode. Visit my website at sunshine-parenting.com and search for episode 32. If you listened all the way to the end of this podcast and are one of my regular podcast listeners, thank you so much for being here with me. I really enjoy doing the podcast, and I hope you're enjoying the interviews and topics that I'm covering here at the podcast. I would really appreciate it if you'd take a few minutes and visit iTunes and rate and review the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. As of today, when I'm recording this in the beginning of April, there is one review for the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. So if you like it, please visit iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and give me a rating and a review. If you write a review, I'm going to enter you in a drawing for a really fun parenting package that I'm going to give out at the end of April to 5 people. So, happy listeners of Sunshine Parenting, let me know what you think by putting a review on iTunes. Thank you so much. I'm going to end with how Stephen started his article entitled 10 Reasons Why High School Students Will Get a Lot from Summer Camp. It was published in March in the Teen Life blog. Theodore Roosevelt reportedly said, "In any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing is the wrong thing, and the worst thing you can do is nothing." While Teddy was likely speaking of deciding issues far weightier than what to do with high school students during the summer months, with the advent of spring, it's a topic of discussion around more than a few family dinner tables. My answer? The best thing to do is send high school students to summer camp.